Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a size comparison for you. First off, we got the Spyderco Delica, as always. Got your Ontario Rat number 2 and your Ontario Rat number 1. How many times you heard me say those words? No doubt a number of them. And look, that's because these have been for a long time on my channel, sort of the traditional size comparison pieces. And that's become a thing. A lot of people have asked me, Nick, why do you do the size comparisons at all? Why not just measure everything out? And how do you choose which knives you use? Why do you use these guys? That's kind of a weird choice, right? And so I figured I'd talk a little bit today about the size comparisons, as well as announce a change in my spate of size comparison knives. So, why is size comparison knives at all? Well, certainly I could let's take a knife like this. This is the Tuya Knives Hive. I don't think a lot of people are super familiar with it, and I could go through and I could measure it all out. I could show you, okay, blade is 3.5 inches. I could then, get a bigger ruler and then talk about the overall length, etc. I could talk about the grip size and things like that, but at some level, that takes a lot of time. And those are pieces of information you can find online. What I want to give for people instead is a very intuitive sense of the size of something. And comparing it against a known reference point is always a good way to do that for people. Because people have seen over and over again everything on my table compared against these three knives. And so if you see where this knife falls into place, you have a pretty good sense of where it'll fall into place relative to some of the other things that you've seen on the channel, as well as certainly relative to these guys. So that's why I do the size comparisons. It provides a relatively quick, relatively intuitive way for you to get a sense of the size of things, whether relative to a knife that you own if you've got one of these guys, or just relative to a bunch of other knives that you've seen on the channel continuously over time. And why have I chosen these three knives? Well, that's a really good question. In many ways, it started off with the Delica just because I really do like the Delica. I think it's an amazing piece, and, in the past, it has been one of my go-to recommendation sort of knives. But actually, there are three main things that I really look for in a size comparison. The first one is availability. It wouldn't make any sense to do comparisons against something that's really hard to find. If I had a one-off custom knife, it does nobody any good. So I don't do that. These three knives are all in pretty heavy production still. You can find one of these guys pretty much at most of your sporting goods stores here locally. I mean, at least here in the U.S. Okay, maybe not most of them, but still, you can find one of these pretty readily, I'd say, in any given large U.S. city. And certainly online, you can find them pretty much anywhere. So they're widely available, and even around the world. I've seen Delicas in South Africa, so they're out there. Pricing may be a difference, but still. Then the next thing is affordability. Pricing is actually important here because in some ways my hope is that, and my suspicion is that some people will pick up one of these knives simply because, hey, I recommend it. I think it's a great piece, but also so that they have that easy size comparison in their mind. If they look at something new relative to your Rat number 2 and you own a Rat number 2, it makes it a little bit easier to get a sense of it because you have an intuitive feeling for, oh, that's how big this guy is. Okay, that's easy enough. And so that might make things a little bit easier for you, but these guys, it wouldn't make sense if I did that for something that was $900. I mean, even if it is readily in production, for a lot of people, they'll never even get to handle one of them. Whereas these guys, I think for most people, at least here in the U.S., these guys in the $35 to $40 range, I mean, that is the Rat 1 and Rat 2, are pretty doable for a lot of folks. Yeah, you might save a little bit. Yeah, it's a chunk of change, but at the same time, I think most folks can probably swing $30 to $40, give it a little bit of foreplanning. So no matter your budget, these two at the very least should be accessible. And the Spyderco Delica, when I first started the channel, was actually a very good value. We were looking at, what, I want to say like $60, $65. Originally, when I started, that is, and at that price, it actually made a lot of sense. It was a very, very nice piece. And it remains a very nice piece. That actually brings us to the last part, which is recommendation. For a knife to be a good size comparison, I have to recommend it. If I'm, giving you size comparison Z-Hunter, people are going to go out and buy Z-Hunters, and I've probably sold enough knives for them already for my consciousness to, my conscience, that is, to be unclean. But nevertheless, I mean, I want the pieces that I recommend to people to be pieces that I recommend to people. And these knives are unquestionably good. The Rat series is amazing, frankly. These guys here are just spectacular. I've probably recommended these two knives to people just in my life and in my channel more than anything else, just because they're so damn good. The price-wise, they're amazing. The steel's in D2, and you can get them. They're just great. The actions are good. They're just, you could tell me, Nick, it's over. You're just carrying the Rat 2 for your rest of your life. I'd be disappointed, certainly, and my pockets would be a little bit less fancy, but it would still get the job done, and that's something right there. So I really do recommend these guys. And the Spyderco Delica is in many ways a prototypical amazing knife for me. it doesn't get a whole lot better than this little guy. This guy, his name is Stan, by the way, the gray scale. I haven't asked the Nick where I talk about how he got his name, but it's named after a good family friend and really amazing human being in general, who carried a Delica. So, yeah, anyways, that's beside the point. But, this has been an amazing piece for a long time. I mean, it's got a lot of really wonderful things going forward. It's very carryable. This is, in some ways, one of the Spyderco's high points throughout their career. Unfortunately, though, one of the things that has changed a great deal with the Delica in the last few years is the price. This has gone from being a $65 knife to being an $80 knife, and unfortunately, nothing else about it has changed. The Delica is made in the Spyderco Japan factory, and the Seki City, Japan, whatever. And unfortunately, Japan prices just seem to be getting higher and higher, and the quality doesn't seem to be, well, certainly the quality doesn't seem to be rising, and in some cases, they had some trouble. I actually picked up this carbon fiber Delica recently because, well, I love the Delica, and unfortunately, I was seriously disappointed with it. I mean, in addition to the fact that the centering is just way off, there are two states for this: incredibly tight, with zero blade play and practically no action at all, or heavy blade play and it almost has an okay action. I'm super disappointed in this knife, and unfortunately, yeah. And this has not been an uncommon occurrence, at least among people I've talked to coming out of that factory, so it seems like things might be slipping over there a little bit. I don't know. Again, no inside information, but as a result, though, the Delica is becoming a knife that's harder to recommend, and another big part of that is just because the competition is getting so much better. From Spyderco themselves, they have released recently the Spyderco Chaparral and FRN. This is... I love the Delica, but I just have to say, this is a better knife. It's using XHB, which is a nicer steel. The action on it is better. I like the FRN texturing better. It's more carryable. You are sacrificing very, very, very little blade length for a much smaller overall size in the pocket. It is super thin and slicey. This knife is like $10 more than the Delica is these days, but it's just 2 times, 3 times better. So I can't think of a time I've recommended the Delica since this guy came out. I love the Delica, but it's more of an emotional love at this point than a practical, you should do this choice. And as a result, and I'm seeing other signs out of Spyderco, and I don't have any inside information here. This is all speculation, but it really does seem like they're starting to sort of drift away from it internally. They're doing things like the Para 3 lightweight, the Sage 5 lightweight. They're doing FRN models in Taichung, where this guy is done, not Japan, as well as out of gold. And I'm just wondering whether we're not going to be in a post-Delica future at some point in time. And so that leads me in a really awkward situation. I'll be honest, because, okay, one possibility is I just start adding things to the size comparison list. Like, okay, size comparison, Spyderco Delica, Ontario Rat number 1, not the, damn it, number 2, number 1. Okay, here it is against your FRN Chaparral. Here's your Cricket Seismic. Here's your Cold Steel 8010. I could keep swapping things out until I was blue in the freaking face, and that wouldn't do anybody any good, because after a while it gets pretty boring pretty quickly. Even 3 is too many. But having my canonical 3 doesn't make quite as much sense anymore, when one of them is one I don't recommend so much. And frankly, the Rats, they're very similar knives, and but different scales. So I've been thinking for a while about changing things up a little bit. Now, here's the issue. I am not remotely a rational human being. Let's be real here, right? And so for me, there is an element of tradition. Size comparison Spyderco Delica has been a part of my channel for so long that it would feel disingenuous to change that. And so what I've decided to do instead, to prepare for a potentially post-Delica future, as well as to deal with the fact that these two knives are not substantially different, and to address a different portion of the population, I've decided to bring in a new size comparison knife. I love the Rat 1. I still recommend the Rat 1 every day of the week, but in its place, from here on out, we're going to have a different piece, and that piece is the Spyderco Paramilitary 2, or the PM2. Look, the PM2 is one of those knives that is sort of a default. It's very easy to recommend to somebody. Personally, I have a slight preference for the Shaman for my everyday carry life, but this is a good knife. I cannot deny that this is an amazing knife. It is also a bigger knife than either the Delica or the Rat number 2. It is a very different knife, and I think it's a knife that a lot of collectors have around. If you are in the higher end knife game, there's a pretty good chance that you've picked up a PM2 at some point in time. And so these represent now three different price points. A very inexpensive knife that you can pretty easily afford, given a little bit of saving. Something that's, well, more there for tradition, and then something that's on the higher end. And given you're going to be hard-pressed to find a serious knife person who has never handled a PM2 or may not own one, it seems like a reasonable choice. Sure, there are now two Spydercos on the table. I looked around, thought of other options, but honestly, I think this is a good choice here. And so from here on out, these are going to be my size comparison pieces. The Rat 1 might come back for a comeback tour from time to time, and if they eventually do completely get rid of the Delica, even emotion might be too much to keep it around. And of course, you're going to keep seeing videos for a good while that have been done, from the backlog, so to speak, that have been done before I made this shift. But if you see these three, it's a relatively recent video, and, that's my train of thought here. So I still do love the Delica, and frankly, my fondest desire would be that they move to a Delica 5 and they do it someplace else, at like Taichung or Golden. I don't know that they'll ever do that, but the hell, man, would that be nice? Little finger choil in here, just a couple of little tweaks, wire clip. Oh, I hope I dream, I pray. But just in case, I've future-proofed the lineup a little bit, and there you go. So I hope this has been interesting to you. I hope that you are well familiar with the size of the relative items on the table here, and I'm sure I'm overthinking this, as I overthink every other damn part of this channel, but mostly I hope that you have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. So say it with me. Size comparison, Spyderco Delica, as always, Ontario Rat number 1, and Spyderco PM2. Oh, damn it! There's only one rat on the table, and I said Rat 1. People, I am not a brilliant man. Well, hey, if I'm starting a new tradition, I might as well start it that way, right? Anyways, hope this has been interesting. Have yourselves a wonderful rest of your day. Go find a better reviewer to watch. Bye now.